Okay. I believe recording is pending. Oh, there we go. We have started our recording. Excellent. Okay. So welcome everybody. We have today our training through the Early Learning Resource Center, who, for those who aren't familiar, this is, I know a lot of people kind of refer to it as the new CCIS, but we wanted to be sure to help get some good information for our families, since whether you're in foster care or permanency or whatever your role is, it's good to have this information for our families. I did have one person submit questions ahead of time, and I had sent the answer on. That was kind of the way to get a list of providers. So you have an email about that, as well as a little bit of documentation that was sent to us by our presenters. But I'm actually going to let you gentlemen introduce yourselves, because it occurs to me I don't want to sell you short. So welcome, Chuck and Doug, and if you would please have the floor. Thank you.
I'm Doug McGarvey. I'm the family specialist manager for Erie County, Crawford County, Venango County, and Mercer County. So I oversee all of the eligibility side of the CCW, determining the eligibility of parents for, the child care and such. So that's my role.
And my name is Chuck Lytle. I'm the resource specialist. So my role is to try to help providers and providers and families find resources that might help them either run their business or help them with their business. Families who are looking for childcare, I try to help them find programs. I think that's that email I sent to you guys, how to find childcare programs in that person's area through Compass. And I try to give them their own tools to utilize, but I'll find it for them also, especially in today's times with COVID. It is very hard to find infant toddler care. Just everyone's full where they don't have the staff. But other resources too, such as LIHEAP, rent, anything they may need help on. I try to find those resources. We don't have the resources, but I try to identify where they can get that help from.
Phenomenal. And I know that this is obviously a big, important thing for our families. As you know, all of our children that we work with are in the foster care system, whether with kinship or in a traditional foster placement. Can you let us know, maybe for those who aren't familiar at all with kind of the Early Learning Resource Center, can you kind of give us an overview and help us to understand what ELRC is all about?
Chuck, do you want to go as the resource person, or?
Sure, I'll go. Again, it's the ELRC is Early Learning Resource Center. It's early learning childcare. Again, we identify, we try to tell families about high quality childcare, how to find high quality childcare. If you're in the state of Pennsylvania, which we are in the state of Pennsylvania, we have a QRIS system, or a quality system called STARS. I don't know if anyone knows about that. It's STARS 1, 2, 3, and 4. And I like to relate it to like a motel. If I want to go to a nice motel, I'd rather go to a star 4 motel versus a star 1 motel. Childcare kind of runs the same way. If it's a star 1 program, star 2, star 3, they work their way up in quality. And so I try to make families familiar with that, how that works. And I also try to say that just because a program's a star 1 doesn't mean they're super bad. It doesn't mean that at all. It means they didn't participate in the quality system that Pennsylvania offers. It is a volunteer quality system. You don't have to participate in stars. When a new provider comes into, like say a new provider opens up, and they go on what's, DHS license them. They do not become a star 1 until they're off their provisional. They're on a provisional for, I believe it's 6 months. They're on a provisional. After 6 months, they come off that provisional and automatically become a star 1. And that's when we have quality coaches. We have 4 quality coaches in each of the counties that Doug mentioned earlier: Erie, Mercer, Venango, and Crawford. We have quality coaches who help those providers move up in stars. They give them, the professional development they may need, the tools they may need, like what kind of staff do they have to hire. And so as they climb up in stars, there's also incentives to climb up in stars, because we do offer CCW, which is Child Care Works funding. When we pay for child care, if they're in CCW, there's a base rate, there's a maximum rate we're allowed to pay. But then if they're in stars 1, 2, 3, or 4, as they move up in stars, there's tier reimbursement. So if you're a star 4 program, you may get our maximum base rate. I'm using these numbers. Let's say it's $35 for an infant a day. So they may get $35 a day for that infant. But for a star 4 program, they'll get $10 added on top of that each day, because they did a lot of stuff to get to a star 4. And so instead of 35, they'll get $45 a day. And so forth. That tier reimbursement goes higher with the stars. You don't get anything for star 1, star 2. Like star 1, you get the base rate only. Star 2, you get a little bit more money. Star 3 higher, star 4 higher, and that's the incentive for programs to go through the quality system. And they have a whole team that comes in and observes you as a star 3 and star 4. It's not like you just sign some papers. Star 3 and 4, they have a Pequot team, which is not part of us, but they come in and evaluate the daycares to make sure they are what they say they are. And you have to renew that every 3 years, I believe it is. Does anyone have any questions about how that works?
Is there a cost to the child care facilities to do this? I mean, obviously, I would assume that hiring people, like there's intrinsic cost, but to go through the program, there's not a extra cost for that.
There's not an extra cost for it. Our services, the only cost that might come about if they have to take certain professional development, there might be like a $5, $10 copayment to take these. A lot of them online, especially today with COVID. But there's no real out-of-pocket cost. So there is cost, like the, uh, taking courses. You're having your staff take courses. You got to pay them to take the courses, so there's that kind of cost. But there's not a fee to participate in it. Uh, I'll use my own personal example. My wife and I ran a daycare for 30 years, and uh, we were not involved in stars till about 15, 16 years ago when it first came out. And you've run through the hoops like any system. Some things you don't agree on. You think you know more than everyone else, but you really don't. But as we went through the system, we did see our program. We went all the way up to star 4, and the good, the bad, the ugly, we've gotten better. And I can see that improvement looking back in retrospect, how it became better. And it's not easy to go through it all, but at the same time, it's worth it. If once you build that relationship with the quality coaches, and you start to learn the resources out there, and it really does help you improve your program. It helps you build a relationship with families, how important that relationship is, getting to know your families. But your first question was, is there a cost to it? No, there's not a cost. Unlike some others who get NACE accredited, they go through NACE and they become accredited. And a lot of programs can do that. They become NACE accredited, and we recognize that as being high quality. So if they want to come into star system, they're automatically a star 4. They got to do some paperwork, a little bit of paperwork, but they did it a different avenue. They didn't want to go through stars. They went through NACE. So they can come NACE accredited, but then NACE accredited, like you're saying, there's a cost to it. I think it's like a $3,000 cost to go through a NACE accredited. But that's some way some people pick that way. And it might be because they might get grants because they become a NACE accredited. So there might be grants out there for that kind of program.
So for those who aren't familiar with the STAR system, and certainly I don't expect you to go through every moment or aspect of it, but what sort of things does a star entail? Other than obviously you mentioned the coaching, but I mean, what sort of changes does a facility make, or what would I know about a facility who has 4 stars versus less than that?
Right. A lot of beginning, it's developing policies. what policies you need in place, for, uh, you know, we, the big thing this last couple of years has been trying not to suspend kids from programs or expel them. And that happens. It still happens today, but we're trying to limit that. So we try to develop policies and the ways they should, if they're having trouble implementing any kind of, uh, uh, you know, plan for around a child who's having trouble with it, they develop a plan using the intermediate unit or using Erie School District's preschool TA. Uh, so the policies is a big one. Also, it is developing your staff has to have a higher education. At a star 3 and 4, most of your staff either have to have associates or a bachelor's degree, and then they could have a credential, which is a school age credential or a child development credential, which is someone who may have gone to high school and did not go to college or doesn't want to go to college, but they want to be in childcare. They may go for what is a CDA credential. So higher education, there's always that mixed message. There are some very good people out there who do not have the education that backs it up, but are very good in a child care program. Uh, but at the same time, we want to advocate uh, education and keep furthering your education. Even I've been doing this for quite a while, and just like you know, most child care programs, 30 years, there's still more to learn. There's still new uh, uh, research out there developing about the brain development and the progress of development of a child, and we can hopefully implement that into our program. Uh, Star 4 program versus Star 1. There are some great Star 1 programs. They just decide not to go through it. There's a program here in Erie. I don't want to give its name, but they decide not to go through the program. They are NACE accredited, but they don't want anything to do with us, and that's okay. But they're a good program. But when I try to solicit what programs they go to, I try to encourage people to go to Star 3s and 4s. But I also say you got to be wary too of a Star 3 and 4 program. They might know how to play the system, and just able to do all the work and do everything and make it look good, but they don't really follow the rules when no one's in there watching. And I try to warn them that go visit a program, go see a program. If they don't allow you to come in any day, like I don't know about with COVID time, but you should be allowed to go visit a program anytime. Now, if you want to come in unannounced, I would say you might have to just come in and observe. If you want to have a meeting with someone, then you should set that up. But when we had our business, I said, come in anytime, come unannounced, because that's when you're going to see us either at our best or at our worst. Hopefully it's our best, because we didn't want to have you can't come in yet. You got to wait until we get everything set up. So we encourage them to and go see other daycares. Don't just go visit one child care program. Visit others. And learn from them and look at them, and because you're investing a lot of money. Childcare costs a lot. It's easily uh one child's probably close to $600 a month. So most families, young families, have 2 kids today. Not like back when I was growing up, you had 5, 6 kids possibly. You have 1 or 2 kids, you're talking about a $1,200 bill a month. That's more than any car you're going to buy. It might be more than any house you're going to buy. So invest in time looking at it. I'm amazed how many people come in. They don't even know you, and they'll sign them up without even coming in looking at the place, and that surprises me. But they'll check out a car and take a car for a test drive and do all kind of things like that. That's not everybody, but I think I try to encourage them. Check out childcare. If you get a good vibe, you see that the staff look happy, the children look engaged, it looks clean. There's a lot of other things you can look for, and we have pamphlets that can go out. uh, Take time to read that and see what you should be looking for. Maybe you want to look at ratios. Are they in the correct ratios? Like an infant, if you have all infants, the ratio is 1 to 4. If you have young toddlers, it's 1 to 5. If you have older toddlers, those are 2 and 3 year olds, the ratio should be 1 to 6. Preschool age kids, 3 and 4, should be 1 to 10. And then school age is 1 to 12. So are they in the correct ratio? Or do I have 25 kids in there and I'm by myself? And I see that. If you just know those little things in the beginning, what is permitted and what's not permitted, you might see that, yeah, they're following ratios. Uh, that's what I try to tell them to look for, and then there's other things they can look for too. Uh, and developing policies, I mean, it's easy to develop policies, but are you implementing them? You know, we can say all these things on paper, but how are you implementing them? And I think that's important. Uh, any other questions? I mean,
I mean, certainly if people, as we're listening, please feel free if you've got questions
definitely.
to ask away.
And
How would you recommend, um, in a time when, there's obviously shortages of staff and concerns about whether or not children are allowed to be in schools and all of that. I feel as though it's probably harder to be choosy in these times.
it,
So, how do you recommend people navigate this?
it is very hard today. I mean, we're getting calls every day. You gave us a list, Chuck, and I called 5 of them, and no one has room. And that's the case probably 9 out of 10 times. Is everyone is full. Either they're full with the kids, or they don't have enough staff because staff are being leery to come back into the field. Uh, or it is exhausting going through this COVID and all the rules and the policies that CDC come. It is exhausting to keep that up to date and make sure you're doing it right. Uh, uh, 2 years ago when we first came out of when I came out, trying to tackle getting back into childcare with the pandemic, uh, we set up the daycare that we own. My wife and I, we sold it to our son. Thank goodness we sold it to him because then the pandemic hurt. So that was great. Uh, but my wife still teaches there, and I teach in the mornings. But at the same time, when we first opened up, we kept kids 6 feet apart from each other, and we had separate bins, separate. It wasn't that normal socialization and getting on top of each other, play with each other, and you had the mask on, but you were cleaning left and right all day, and just try to keep it safe. And you had the same 10 kids all day, and you kept them in pods. Like your 4-year-olds had their own 10 group, then another teacher had their own 10 group. Instead of having 20, we only had 10 in a room. And then we separated the play spaces so they were, whatever area they were playing in, they were 6 feet apart from the other area. And it really was like, oh man, this is exhausting. It was kind of nice because you only had 10 kids. You really got to know those kids. Uh, but then I'll get a call where a parent, I guess you asked earlier, like, what do we do when we can't find a spot? I'll sometimes find, okay, what is your address? I'll find that zip code, and I have access to a lot of child care programs that I'll get all those zip codes, and I'll punch up all these daycares. It takes a little bit of time, and I'll send a personal email out to them, and I'll ask the client, do you mind if I put your email so they can return to you if they have an opening? And I said, give me the times you need and the days you need. And I'll write a letter. Hey, we have a family needing childcare. We're having trouble finding it. It's a 3-year-old, Monday through Friday, let's say 8 o'clock a.m. to 5 o'clock p.m. And then it goes out to maybe 60 of them at once. Please respond back. And I give your clients, whoever the client is, their email if they give me permission to do that. And then hopefully they go directly to them instead of them having to call, because it does get frustrating. You call and you get nowhere. Uh, and childcare programs are very busy, so it's hard to answer all the phone calls all the time and stay on top of it. A lot of them are probably being put on wait list, but I always think a wait list is kind of useless because if you're on a wait list, I need daycare today. I don't need it 2 months from now, 3 months from now, a year from now. I need it today. And most daycares are planning for next fall already. They already got their fall roster almost in place for next year. So if you're looking for childcare now, it's going to be hard. But if you need it in the fall, now's the time to start putting your name out there and try to get it. And then the infants and toddlers are even harder because those ratios are so small.
So when we have when we have a child who's placed, obviously they don't have any way of having planned ahead, whether that's
Sure. Yeah.
kinship or foster. Can you kind of walk us through the process, maybe?
Well, Doug, please correct me if I misspoke because it's foster children are a high priority. Just being a foster child, they put them on a high priority list. There's not a wait list right now at this moment for CCW families, But in the past, before all the ARPA funds came in, all that, there was a wait list. It could take 2, 3, 4 months before they got in CCW funding. But a foster child, they automatically move to the top of that list. And so we try very hard to find them a process. They got to get an application. They got to get an application from us. We could send your program application so you have them with you already, and you could help them fill it out. Sometimes that's the hardest hurdle, is filling out this application. We don't make things easy. It's just life. Government does not make things easy. There's a lot of pieces of paperwork that have to be filled out before we can move on with process the application. I would love to see the application come in with all the birth certificate, or not the proof of residence and all that kind of stuff, and the wages and all that, so that it can be done right away. A lot of times what happens, the application comes in and we send out a missing information letter, so that delays it. And so we could send you guys a packet of 10 applications. So as clients come in and you need to find them, Fosca, have them fill that out right away.
Absolutely.
Doug,
that would be helpful. Thank you.
Yep. And I would like Doug to say if I'm missing any steps. There might be another step that I don't know about.
Well, I think those documents that I sent this morning, Martine, those are the guidance pieces. The application itself comes into there, but that's kind of like the timing and everything of what's necessary. It can be as we have 30 days to process the application, determine eligibility, but that could be day one. Like Chuck said, if they turn everything in, we can do it as soon as we receive all the documents.
Sure. So if someone knew that maybe they didn't have the child placed yet, or even let's say that they wanted to be foster parents, they knew they were going to be needing childcare, but they don't know what child they're going to have, could they apply ahead of time without all the information of the specific child, just so that you have their information kind of started? Or do you recommend that they just hold everything, and then when they get that placement letter, they can just give it to you, as you said, maybe all filled out and ready?
Yeah, hold out until that point. Now, when you're saying a placement letter, are you saying a placement letter from OCY or a placement letter from your agency?
No, they get them from OCY.
Okay, so OCY has to fill out an attestation form attesting to the fact that the children are under the care and control of OCY. That attestation piece is probably the biggest hangup in getting that in a timely manner. And unfortunately, due to the regs, we are not allowed to assess eligibility without that attestation for verification of care and control of the child. But the day that the parents do apply, if they get everything in within that 30 days, we can go retro to the date of application. So if the parent, can say, hey, I'm gonna take a chance. I'm gonna go to the YMCA. I'm gonna enroll my child at the YMCA, even though I haven't been determined eligible yet. I know I'm going to be eligible. All I need is to get all this information. And let's say we determine eligibility 20 days from today, and we can go back to today. So we could go back to make that payment. A lot of parents do wait till they're determined eligible just for that safety net. But a lot of the issues when it comes to OCY is the providers need to be a star 2 or above provider. Anything less than that, which we have relative providers and the star 1s that Chuck talked about. Relative providers are providers that are immediately attached to the child via blood, marriage, what have you. Grandparents, aunts, uncles. They can't live in the same household, but we have to get special consideration from OCY if the parent would ever select a relative provider to ensure that that relative that they're selecting doesn't have anything to do with the case. And that once they sign off, this relative provider would then go through the training, kind of a different training than a regulated provider, and then become certified, which would allow them to watch the children. Relative providers are predominantly used for second and third shift because we do not have a lot of availability for childcare during that time. So they really fill a void, especially during those time frames.
So I have a quick question about the relative. You said that they need to be related to the child by blood, marriage, etc. Do they, in the case of a foster care, do they need to be related to the child, or could they be related to the foster family?
Well, that and again, because they're taking care and control, it would be under a court decree. It would fall under that. We're just looking for OCY to say this person is okay. You know, it's not attached to the OCY case at all.
Okay,
we
so
need that in writing to kind of free us up in case anything does in fact happen. Sure. But being that it would be under a court decree to where that family is taking care and control of that child by that court decree, then yes, any relative, you know, that meets that criteria, the aunt, the uncle, grandparents, great grandparents could in fact fill that void.
Okay, great. We do have a question. Stephanie?
This is probably more geared towards our staff, but would we be able to use the adjudication paperwork for that purpose?
It has to, I just got it back. It has to come from the Office of Children and Youth, right? Because okay, so we actually have an actual form. Now, how we operate with OCY, we have a liaison. We have a point of contact at our office. OCY has a point of contact at their office. Sometimes the caseworkers will try to get hold of other caseworkers within our organization, and it's always referred back to the point of contact. So those two people are basically the in-betweeners and are kind of keeping the ball rolling per se. You know, Michelle will reach out to the OCY caseworkers, you know, if anything's missing and such. So if it's coming through OCY, you know, like I said, we have those components, we have those safeguards in place already. So if in fact everything's coming through OCY, by the time that they're approved and maybe under your care and control of the children, hopefully they've already been determined eligible, and they're already, you know, looking or already in care. You know, the children are in care.
What do you find, and maybe you've already answered this, but what do you find is the biggest hang up for getting children into care and determined eligible? Is it just getting completed paperwork, or is there something, I guess I'm thinking, is there something that we can be helping or advocating our people to say, like, here's the biggest thing, so maybe kind of avoid this?
Those two pieces of guidance that I sent you today, that, you know, that one's kind of the checklist of what everything's needed, you know, the pay stubs and all that other stuff. It's kind of a twofold issue though. One is determining the eligibility, you know, once we get all of that information in, but then the second one is once the child's determined eligible and funds are authorized, then, like Chuck said, finding a opening is the next struggle.
Yeah, and I know that a number of our families have really struggled with that, including needing to, you know, just being on long wait lists and things of that nature. So, you know, as you guys had mentioned, that's an issue.
That's across the state.
Yeah, it's everywhere. Yeah, it's bad right now.
So what sort of things, you know, if we are letting our families know about your facility overall, what might you be able to assist with? So finding a placement, getting the childcare paid for through the eligibility process. Is there anything else that's sort of a hidden gem or something that you can really help out with that families should be aware of?
Chuck.
I do think the best it's just making sure that application is complete, and just that's the that bogged it down because after 30 days, we don't have all the paperwork, it closes and they got to start all over again. And so it's vital that they get that paperwork in. And again, if you're working with foster parents, and so I mean, they they might be giving a child a day's notice. Hey, we have a child for you, and that's tough. That's tough to get their life. Okay, we got to find childcare. We got to do this and that.
Oh, they don't even get a day's notice, Chuck. They get it's that day.
Yeah,
Well, the
know,
thing is, too,
it's that day.
I'm not sure in dealing with OCY, they have a program called Special Purchases in which they kind of fill that void between placement and when eligibility is determined. So that is, I think, in anything, that's the piece I would be telling the parents to be communicating with OCY to make sure they're paying that
special purchase,
that window that needs to be paid, because we've had parents that have come back to us and said, hey, my provider's charging me 2 weeks of
childcare,
dues and everything. And, and we can't do anything because the paperwork didn't get in with that time. And then it's like pushing them back to OCY to say, this is the program. So I would make sure that the parents are aware of that program as well, to be kind of to make sure that there is kind of that safety net in place in case there's a delay with processing their CCW application.
Okay. Leah, you had your hand up. Did you have a question that you wanted to ask?
So I just want to be like straight. So OCY has to give if they're under OCY care, then they get a pre-approval, correct? And then from there, they have to fill out all the applications and find the place. So if we are trying to help them figure all of this out, it still has to go back to the OCY worker to help them find the approval and the place to begin with, correct?
No, the only thing that we truly need from OCY is that attestation form. You guys can assist with whatever you want in any way, shape, or form.
Way. Okay.
Beyond that, absolutely. We just need that attestation from OCY.
But Doug, I'm just this foster stuff always confuses me. You get the attestation, they still need the application to get filled out, right?
They need all that other stuff, yes. And again, the checklist was sent, all that information today. I don't know, did I CC you on that, Chuck?
You did.
Okay. It's kind of that checklist there, and the last towards the very bottom, it is that custody verification, if necessary. So basically all that. Now here's a nuance to it. If the foster parent only has the foster child in care, they do need to turn in their income, but their income really isn't taken into consideration. It's a $5 copay a week. So their obligation is $5 a week. If they have biological children and those biological children are also receiving CCW care, that foster child goes into that family as prioritized, but now the family income does come into play, and dependent upon the annual income of the family with their biological children in care too, their copayment is determined based on the state rate, the state formula. So if it's strictly the foster, it's $5 copay. If biological comes into the mix, it's basically business as usual.
Can I ask a question? You made me think of a question, Doug. Let's say that you do have a family that has a couple kids and they do not qualify for CCW. Does the foster child still get the $5?
What they would do is they would reapply with just the foster child.
Okay.
Needing care.
Okay. Because we want to cover that, I think. I mean, unless they're love to pay.
But again, it's going to come into play. Also, it's as simple as just saying, I don't want my biological children in care.
Right.
We uncheck that, boom, they become eligible. It's a $5 copayment.
Okay, thanks.
I know that this can be kind of a lot of information and maybe a little confusing at times. Are there other questions or clarifications at this point that people have?
If you do have a foster family having trouble finding childcare, I would suggest you're welcome to send them my way, and I will try hard to. I mean, I have contacts and I'll send emails I'll send to providers, trying to, it is hard. It's very hard today uh, to find childcare, and so, but I do enough begging, they might let them child come. I don't know. I do a lot of begging, that's for sure.
Leah, you have a question?
How often do they have to be like reauthorized to keep their childcare?
The redetermination is once a year. It used to be every 6 months, but the state has moved it to once a year. And on a side note, if a family qualifies, they're working and everything, conceivably they could quit their job the next day and still be eligible for care for the entire year. They just would not receive any additional care. If they needed additional days of care or what have you, it's kind of a status quo. But for that year, you are eligible for services, 365 days after you're determined eligible. And but you just have to be working at the time of redetermination and application.
These are Doug's loopholes.
So if you had a family member, for example, who did not work, but they were not a main caregiver, like let's say you have like grandma who lives in the house, is an adult but is not, she's older, or maybe she needs some help, she's not able to care for the children. Does that affect their eligibility? Because I know that the parents need to at least be working, but
well, the parents don't have to, like you set up an important point there with the grandmother. She's disabled and unable to watch the children. Even parents who are disabled and they get a doctor's note that said I'm unable to watch the children, they qualify for that. But an extended family member, something like that, we would probably gauge that on a case-by-case basis. Our goal is to make sure that we get our clients the services without breaking any rules and everything, but thinking outside the box. If it's going to benefit the grandmother to be in there and she can't work, to reduce the copayment or something like that, we will think, we'll work outside the box to make sure that, we're getting the most benefit for our clients.
Okay, it looks like Leah, you've got another question.
I just was wondering if ELRC covers any of the medically dependent childcares now. Like there's some, we have kids that are more medically dependent, but still are requiring some childcare. And I know there's a couple places through the hospitals now. I'm just wondering if they're involved with any.
The provider, they would have to have a signed agreement with the ELRC to be able to serve the children. That's basically all that they need.
They have to have a DHS license. Sorry,
DHS license.
They have to be licensed by DHS. And then they can do a certified agreement with us.
Yeah, we don't do anything with agreements until everything's in place for them to legitimately be caring for kids. But that's something too, if there's places out there that, like you're saying, these child care facilities for the, special needs and such, let Chuck know. We'll reach out to providers, if we catch wind that, there's a provider out there to see if they're interested in.
Well, when Leah was talking, I could think of the one on Powell Street. I can't remember what it's called now.
Not on Powell, on Peninsula.
Peninsula, you're right. Thank you. On Peninsula. Yep. I can't even think of the name now. I see the buses all the time, and they're picking up children who need intensive medical help. But I think they're getting funding another way too. So I don't mean to
Yeah, and that might be the issue too, if they're receiving state funding and everything, not to be able to double dip. That would have, because we deal with that with pre-K counts and Head Start and everything. We have to make sure these funds are, that the providers aren't, double dipping and in some cases possibly triple dipping. So
So that one on Peninsula is not an ELRC one.
Well, none of them are ELRC. It's DHS, and there's different departments.
Okay.
They're the ones that certify providers. They're not. I'm almost 100% sure they're not DHS licensed.
Oh, okay.
I wouldn't think so either. Probably more specialty.
Yes. Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah. Yeah, they're not. I would see their name.
They would be on our certification list.
But it's a good idea. I didn't ever thought about getting them DH license. I never even.
Yeah, if there's any others out there too, that to maybe lead them into where they can become DHS certified and sign on for agreements with us. And there are providers that are out there. There's not many. There are providers that are out there that do not have ELRC agreements. They choose not to accept CCW children. So it's strictly, they're strictly self-pay. All of their clients are paying out of pocket. So that's another, they could say, hey, we want to go to South Hills. Well, guess what? We don't have an agreement with South Hills. But there's very few and far between that are not part of.
And just outside the foster care, I mean, I don't know who works in your program here. If they're looking for childcare and they don't qualify for CCW because they make too much money, there are programs out there. Like there's Erie Future Funds. They help not find, but they will pay for preschool ages 3, 4, and 5. They'll pay $27 a day, but they have to go to a star 3 or 4 program. And so that's one that, that's they're 350% of poverty versus what if we CCW were what, 200?
200, yeah.
So a family of 4 can make almost $90,000 and qualify for Erie Future Funds.
Chuck, do you want to send Martine that flyer?
Yeah, thanks.
That way,
that'd be even better. Huh? Yes, I will.
Are you going to send her application, electronic version application too?
It might be Sharon, but I will get it done.
I will. I have already sent the ones that you guys had sent earlier to all of the people who were invited to this webinar. So I will be sure to send whatever other information you're giving us. And I again, thank you very much for sending those things ahead of time and for this. It sounds like, if someone were to, because it is very overwhelming when you get a child placed. So if one of our families were to say, okay, I somebody mentioned this, I really don't know what to do. It sounds like we should first give them those that frequently asked questions, or kind of like read this first, I think it's even called, of, here's what you're going to need, here's how to gather it. If, so they can get that started. And then if they're truly stuck, struggling, we can put them in touch with you, Chuck, if they're really struggling to find a placement or, get things kind of sorted out. They'll need to be that letter of, or form of determination. I'm sorry, I don't remember exactly what it's called.
Yeah.
That'll be from the OCY place, as well as obviously the letter saying that they're in care with specifically that family, as opposed to just being in OCY's care, but also that they're placed with that family. So those are two important things that they would need from OCY. So it sounds like for the most part, we've got a pretty good map of maybe how to handle it from for a struggling family. I see Leanne has her hand up.
I'm sorry if you already answered this. I was just curious, are there any service providers that take babies less than 6 weeks old?
That's a good question. I don't know. I
Okay,
don't.
that was
It's just been DHS is always 6 weeks and above. So
okay.
I personally, as a child care program, I wouldn't want anyone younger than 6 weeks. Just that's my own personal opinion. It's just, that's tough. That's hard. That's
I know
scary.
we've had some families struggle with when they get a baby out of the hospital if they're working, to get that time off work those first 6
And
months.
that might be something to where, to work with OCY and see if, maybe a relative provider might be able to fill that void in that interim.
Okay, that's a good idea.
And I also put in the chat, I put the link to the DHS website that has the ELRC link right to it. So that's just kind of the state overview of the program and where the LRCs and everything are located and such.
Thank you.
I'll also send you what to look for in a quality child care program. So at least if they want to read it, they can read it, and there's some questions they can maybe ask when they go visit a program.
Maybe all those documents, Chuck, out of that face-to-face.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot. There's so much information, but I hate to overwhelm people.
Right.
I mean, it's fun. It's everybody, whether you're foster. Like I had my daughter call me from Pittsburgh and say, "Hey, Dad, I'm working with somebody here. She's having a baby in a few months. How does she find a child care program?" I mean, I'm not educated, and she's smart, but they never done it before. And I sent her I said, "Give me her address, and I'll find daycares in that area." You can do it anywhere in Compass in Pennsylvania. So I find areas in Pittsburgh wherever she lived. Sent her only star 3s and 4s. I said, "That's what you want." And my daughter said, "Gee, she thinks you're a rock star." I said, "I do something right once in a while." But a brand new parent, you don't know what you don't know. And holy cow, what a crazy system we have sometimes, and help them. But if we can, we will.
LRC has to.
Well, and you're exactly right. A brand new parent, you don't know what you don't know. And I think sometimes with our foster parents, they find themselves in a very different, whether it's foster or kinship, they're sort of thrust into a whole new role that it's not what they were when they were raising their kids, maybe, or whatever, but it is all brand new. And there's a lot of regulations and all sorts of things that they're struggling with. So, again, we're very thankful to have this training and to be able to help our families, and that you guys provide this kind of help, because, as you say, it's overwhelming in general, and just choosing a childcare when you have a bunch of choices is hard. So
right.
Other questions?
Now, what county do you serve, or counties?
So primarily our is Erie and Crawford. We do have occasional times outside of that area, but most of our families are going to be either Erie or Crawford County.
Okay, and is that both dealing with both county OCYs?
Yes.
Okay, because we have a satellite office in Meadville, or
Yes.
a Crawford office. So and the thing is, the OCYs operate differently from county to county too. So I'm not sure that there's such a big delay at the Crawford County because of the smaller caseload maybe. But yes, it would be two different points of contact as well in regards to that. But I mean, if you wanted to go through me to work with Katie or get you in touch, that's perfectly fine.
Thank you. Yes, I tend to be a little Erie centric in my thinking. So thank you for mentioning that. Yes, we actually have had families who have used that Meadville office and had good success. So whoever your people are there, they're very helpful. So thank you.
I got a question, and it might go to Doug even. Kinship versus foster care. What's the difference, Doug? I mean, I know what kinship. I think kinship is you get an aunt or an uncle or someone to watch a child. Is that correct?
Hold on a second.
I'm asking. I guess that's a question for Mary.
Okay.
Would you like? That's okay. Would you like the definition in terms of what the difference is from a just an overall standpoint, or what the difference is within your organization?
Yeah, give me, I guess, the difference with you first, then I want the difference from Doug.
Okay. So with when a child's removed from their parents, if possible, if they already have someone who's in their life who is a stable and supportive adult, for example, a grandparent, aunt and uncle, family friend, then the court can essentially put that child with that person under kinship, and then that person is emergency certified to become a foster parent. But it is a slightly different kind of determination. They're still a foster child and they're still under the care of OCY, but instead of being placed with a stranger, they're placed with someone who already has that established relationship. So it preserves some of their culture and makes things a little less, hopefully maybe a little less jarring of a transition. On the other hand, if there's not a person in their life who can fulfill that role, either there's not someone who's stable or it's just beyond what they can take on, then they would need to go to a traditional foster home where they don't know that child, they don't know the family. And the biggest difference, I would say, is if they are a kinship provider, they were just living their life, and then all of a sudden this child that they know really needs them. So there's a lot of upheaval in their lives, and suddenly they have truly 60 days to get a whole bunch of paperwork and be certified, and there's a lot of whirlwind. Whereas foster parents, they come to that in their own decisions. So they've talked to family, they've talked to friends, they've remodeled a room, they've, saved up extra money or whatever their life is, before they've come to that conclusion. So they're in many ways more prepared. And they also don't have a strict deadline of how long it takes them to get their certification, because there's not a child waiting on them. So they have the time it takes for them, whether they're through our agency or another, to fully come to their certification. And then, but the rules in general are going to be the same for both. They still have the same, I guess, lack of rights in some ways. It's still OCY who's calling all the shots. It's still, they still have to follow all the court orders. It's just the difference of whether or not they had that relationship to begin with.
And then now my question to Doug, is kinship treated the same way as foster?
Linguistically, yes. Basically, ours is a threefold, and this is from our policy. The first checkbox, which is never, because this is all coming from OCY, placed voluntarily in a kinship case with a relative. That's not prioritized. But in that instance, what it means is OCY wouldn't even have care and control. The second one, which is basically what we get entirely from OCY, is under the care and supervision of the Office of Children and Youth. It's a foster case. It's considered prioritized. And then lastly, the last one is not under the care and control of the Office of Children and Youth. So again, it's just those three things that we have to put on there because of policy. But basically, anytime you're getting this document from OCY, they're under the care and control of them. So again, it's more of a matter of covering the bases.
Mm-hmm. Thanks. And thank you for definitions.
Of course. Anyone else have any questions? We know, Chuck, would you be willing to put your email in the chat?
Sure.
And Doug as well, if you'd like to be contacted. I just know that Chuck had said, feel free to give people my information. So that way we would have it to be able to give people out. And obviously when I get that paperwork, I will be sure to send that on. But does, anyone else who's here have further questions, or can we clarify anything else for you all? Oh, we've got one question here, Chris.
Hey, I was just going over the application here, so I just had some questions on it. You need copies of the 4 most recent pay stubs from the most current 6-week period. What if they're paid every other week?
You just need 4 of the last 6 pay periods. If you get paid every 2 weeks, that's 2 weeks worth of documentation.
And if they're collecting, Social Security, they just need to provide their Social Security.
Well, any income documentation needs to be submitted.
All right, and then just above it says you and your spouse. Is it working at least 20 hours per week? Would it be combined?
No, 20 hours per week per person minimum, unless they're going to school. If you're in a training program, then it's only 10 hours a week plus the training program you're in.
Okay.
And we also have what's called an employment verification form to where the client can take it to their employer and have them fill it out in a 4-week chunk, verifying that this is their schedule, this is their pay rate, and sign off on it. And that can be used in lieu of the pay stubs as well.
I will send you out the applications. I'll send you out paper applications. I'll give you about 10 of them. We'll send them out.
Your
But
email's wrong, Chuck.
My email's wrong.
2 C's at the end.
Oh, okay. ELRC.org. Only 1 C there. Thanks, Doug. Like, what are you talking about? My email's wrong.
Good
It
catch.
is. I'll do it again. Thanks, Doug. You have stuff on right type.
Good catch. We'd have a whole bunch of bounce backs then, huh?
Yes. And then I also send you the digitized too, so that you have it as a PDF, in case you want that way.
Sure.
And they say you have the 10 applications, you go through them all. Just call and say, hey, Chuck, we'd like 10 more. You know, that's fine with us.
Okay.
What is the address I send it to?
It's 5100 Peach Street. And that's 16509. If you'd like to put my name attention, you can, or you can, yeah, that's probably the best. Why don't you go ahead and put my name on it?
Will do. All right. Sounds good.
All right. Well, we're just coming up on 2 o'clock, so I want to be, again, respectful of everyone's time. Thank you all for coming. Thank you, Chuck and Doug, for all of this information and for all that you're sending us. We really appreciate your time and those resources. Sounds like you do an awful lot for our families, and we are very thankful for all that you and your agency does.
No, thank you, and thank you for what you guys do. Appreciate it.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording now.
All right.
Okay.